Concannon, and welcome to Fencing Ireland Sits Down With, a new limited series where I have the pleasure of sitting down with some of the biggest names in Irish fencing to chat about their international fencing experience. Today, I'm talking to Gilhooly, Chairperson of Fencing Ireland. Make sure to stay with us to the end of our chat, where I'll ask Des about his favourite way to score a point. Des, thanks for joining us today.
Welcome, Stephen. Great to see you.
Tell us, how did you start, or how did you get involved in fencing?
Well, when I was a kid, as we all do, I enjoyed playing with swords, and my grandmother quite a while ago got me this book about adventures in Dublin, and there was a page in it on Sal Duffy, the only fencing club I was aware of at the time. Unfortunately, I lived nowhere near Sandymount where Sal Duffy was based, so I never got to follow up on actually taking up fencing until I went to what's now NUI Maynooth. Back then it was St. Patrick's College, and they had a fencing club, and I joined there and took up fencing, and you know, I haven't really looked back on it ever since.
And so did you play any other sports growing up, or what was it that made fencing so enjoyable for you?
I played underage rugby with my local team, and I was also on my school's basketball team. Fencing for me, it was just, it was me on my own against somebody else. I often found, you know, the team sports, you work well within it, but didn't always sit well with me. And just, as I say, the fact that it was one-on-one, me against somebody else, I just preferred that format of sport. I do remember when I first took up fencing, Shirley Duffy, the head of Sal Duffy, was interviewed for the Irish Times, or one of those papers, and made the comment that team sports are not for everybody, and fencing, she thought, was a good alternative for somebody who prefers to compete on their own.
So fencing obviously has all sorts of levels at that individual level. You've had some experience seeing these things up close and personal. For the Olympic Games in London in 2012, what opportunities had you to be involved in that?
I was actually there as a volunteer. I was a part of the field of play team, which basically we're responsible for making sure that only the people who are meant to be out there are there, kind of a security on the floor, and we were the people who brought out the towels and the chairs for the athletes to sit down when they were when they had their minutes break. So yeah, it was a great 10 days experience there, and loved every minute of it.
I don't know where to begin really when you talk about having 10 days up close and personal like that. Was there any particular moments that stood out to you?
I suppose for everybody at the fencing that year, the one moment that stands out is the magic second. Everybody knows that around the world. It made the imagery from that was part of the closing ceremony. Not that people within fencing were particularly happy about that. So that's one moment that stood out. The joy as well that people in the audience had when the ladies Italian foil team won gold. You know, everybody was just doing it. I know one of the, I remember, I think one of them received several proposals of marriage on the spot from from people in the crowd. So yeah, those were two memories I have of it. You know, it's kind of difficult to pick them all out, because it was just, you know, the days just flew by.
No, that sounds incredible, especially as you said, seeing some of the crowd reactions, and also being part of the infamous history of fencing. It's very interesting to see that. And your role with the Olympics isn't quite finished either.
No, I am now heading back to Madrid, hopefully in April, where I will be the semi-delegate, the technical delegate for the zonal qualifiers for the Olympics. So I will be overseeing weapons control and the call room for that. So yeah, roll on Madrid.
Yeah, yeah. And I know some people might ask how it is that you get involved in some of these things. I know you've been involved in it for quite a while. I remember the one championships that I went to, and having some of my own kit fail exams, and being grateful to see you on the other side to give me the advice to get back on track. How long have you been doing some of these major championships for?
Well, it actually started back in 2007. I was asked, a friend of mine said, listen, we're looking for people to help out at the Commonwealth Games at the fencing that year. And I had everything organized. And unfortunately, some changes at work meant that I had to pull out at the last minute, which I wasn't particularly happy about. But then the following 2009, the Junior and Cadet World Championships came to Belfast. So the opportunity was extended to me again. And this time, nothing was stopping me. So I was up there for 2 weeks, working with the weapon control team, which was one of the areas of interest to me. And yeah, that's pretty much where it started. Anytime I got an opportunity to volunteer at a major championships, I jumped at it, particularly in weapons control or wherever I could fit in, really.
Mm. And if someone was keen to get involved in something like that now, what would be the best way for them to go about it?
Keep an eye on the website for the championships. Very often they will put up details of volunteers they're looking for. They're always glad to get volunteers of different nationalities. Or if you know somebody who is going in an official capacity, they may be able to find out for you if there's an opportunity with the organisers.
Mm-hmm.
I do know that organisers always love to have volunteers from around the world if they can get them.
Mm-hmm. And so, in addition to all of your kind of international experience, you're obviously very familiar face around the Irish circuit, and you're currently the chairperson of Fencing Ireland. What ambitions have you for Fencing Ireland in the next few years?
Well, my greatest ambition, and I've never been shy about saying this to people, is to bring a European Championships to Ireland. When I started in the role, obviously, one of the things I did was to organise a meeting with Sport Ireland for the new committee.
Mm-hmm.
Joseph and obviously Dervla, who's joined us as general manager. And I mentioned during that meeting that I would love to see European Championships come to Ireland, and was there any support from Sport Ireland and sports bodies? And they said, yeah, if you have if you can bring together a credible bid for it, we will support it that way. And I spoke with the European Confederation Secretary General, Jacek Slupski, and he said, he recommended a tournament that would be very good for a federation that's taking on their first European Championships. So yeah, I would love to see that come to fruition. Certainly, if COVID had not happened, I would have hoped to have us on the pathway toward that goal. But we'll have to wait and see.
That sounds really exciting, because the exposure it would give to Irish kids to see this championship happening would be amazing. You always, whenever you go to one of these big championships, you're always aware of the days where the school kids get to come along, because it changes the atmosphere entirely on the piece. It's really quite something that would be brilliant.
It does. It's one of the things that I always enjoy about the European Championships, that the organisers bring in the local school children, or even the local young youth fencers, and they get to be the ones that lead out the fencers for the semi-finals and the finals, and they have charge of the fencers' bags, and it's a special moment, I suppose, for them, particularly if they're involved in fencing, and they enjoy it, to go out with fencers like Ariana Erigo, your old foe Aldo Montano, um, and everybody else. Certainly, if they know those names.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It'd be a great opportunity even to get more exposure to Irish people behind the scenes as to what exactly goes on. And that sounds really good.
It is. There's as we discussed earlier, there is always volunteering opportunities there. I work primarily in weapons control. But people can also be involved. Obviously, as I mentioned, at the Olympics, we had the field of play team. There's anti-doping as well. There is working with the referees, timekeeping, working in DT. There's a whole range of opportunities there. Again, it depends on the organizers and the championships as to what level, what opportunities are there, because it does vary from competition to competition. But I will always advocate for somebody to volunteer if they like fencing. Volunteer at the championships. It's a great experience.
So, in your role as chairperson for Fencing Ireland, what is it that you're currently working on, given the current situation of the pandemic that we're in?
Well, we're working on a lot of our governance at the moment, and also we're preparing for when we get back fencing. We've been working a lot with Fencing Ireland we are Fencing Ireland, I mean Sport Ireland, on getting the protocols for returning to sport approved. It's been a very, very slow process. The expert group are taking their time, because I suppose like the public health team, they don't want to take any more chances, any more risks than they absolutely have to, and that's really what's taking up a lot of our time at the moment. And we're also working with Sport Ireland on the various resilience funds for the clubs to give them whatever support that we can. And we have a few other things in the pipeline which are under consideration at the moment, which may or may not come to fruition. We'll see, but we are continuing to work in the background to ensure that we get back up and running as soon as possible.
Yeah, and obviously once we do get back on piste, those who've been training a bit over the break, the extended break, will be the ones to benefit. I saw that there was a 2-4-2 drill put up online. Are there any other unique ways that people might be able to train from home?
Olga from Pembroke, I believe, runs Zoom classes for people. I have seen a number of target dummies that have been homemade target dummies that people have put together for themselves to practice their point work. There is, I suppose, limited opportunity. I think Zoom is probably the best way to work with people. Certainly, if other people within your family, or if you can establish a social bubble, even though it is kind of frowned upon, with another fencer, at least, or go out to a park, bring your weapons with you. Yeah. Get yourself a little private space and train as an outdoor group. I'd love to see that. Obviously, I'm not advocating you breach the guidelines. You have to stay within the guidelines. But yeah, communicate with coaches via Zoom or whatever method you can. Keep fencing, and really, if all you can do is do your footwork and a little bit of point work using a cushion up against a wall, it's all going to benefit you no matter what.
Yeah, no, I have to say I really agree. I remember one summer doing when I couldn't make it to the club in the afternoons, just training outside, and I actually wore through some runners out on paths and that doing footwork. It didn't work out too well, but yeah, like you said, even getting your finger and your point back under control really makes a big difference.
Hmm.
Definitely give people the edge when they come back. Um, Thinking about that again in terms of training, if you could go back and give yourself any advice, your younger self, what do you think that would be?
I would probably tell myself to focus more on training and the techniques involved, rather than, as what I used to do was when I was in Maynooth. We had free access to the fencing equipment. We had free access to the hall, so we could book it for a half hour, an hour, whatever, and a couple of us could get together and fence. And to be honest, we didn't always know what we were doing. We took it, we tried to implement what our coach had taught us at the previous class, and take it from there. But yeah, I would tell myself to focus on the technique rather than putting such an emphasis on actually fencing, sparring.
Yeah. And was there a particular style of fencing or fencer that you did or didn't like going up against?
Later on, I found going up against novices was particularly challenging, because they come at you from every different direction, and you know it, it's an advantage for them, because any day of the week a novice can beat the number one in the world,
Mm-hmm.
simply because of the fact they're so chaotic and disorganized in their style. So yeah, I found them very they always put me on the back foot. uh so it wasn't, I won't say it was something I dreaded, but yeah, I'd prefer it if they were a little bit more controlled. Left-handers were also a bit of a problem, because well, obviously, well, I'm left-handed. I will say that, but most of the people I trained with after my first 2 years in fencing were right-handed, so lefties were a rarity.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's funny. I always try to tell someone to make sure they train with at least one person who's left-handed. But if you are that person, there may not be another one so easily found.
Yeah.
Um, is there any particular fencer that you've seen, either that you fenced against, or that you've seen in some of these big championships that you've really admired?
Um, there's been so many. I suppose one that comes to mind is Ariana Erigo, the Italian fencer.
Mm-hmm.
I think she's a splendid fencer. She's, you know, uh, yeah, she's just great. Like, the Italian fencers in general are all, they're really focused,
Mm-hmm.
and they really, they accept what it is. They're passionate about the sport, and they know they have their good days and their bad days. That's really the ones that come to mind.
Yeah, no, I think that's you're right about the Italians. Although I might disagree, they don't tend to accept many calls at times, but they're great to watch. All right.
Yeah,
Um, uh, what's your favorite way of scoring a point?
it's getting in just behind the just behind the guard.
Mhm.
If you can do that, I really do think it's great. Otherwise, I suppose, in terms of tactics, I beat the blade and go for the upper arm.
It's quite satisfying when you get a nice beat hit. All right, it's
Yes.
definitively you've taken control of that action. No, that's really good. Des, thanks so much again for joining us today. It's been
No
great
problem.
chatting to you and hearing about your life in fencing. Thanks too to all of our viewers. If you do like what you're seeing, make sure to like and subscribe to Fencing Ireland. Don't forget, you can also find Fencing Ireland on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, or at fencingireland.net. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.